Well now, let me tell you about something that happened back in the summer of 1882, that is, in a little Colorado mill town called Copper Ridge. You know how folks say desperate times call for desperate measures? This here's a story about a young woman named Clara who learned just how true that was. She came west with nothing but hope and a traveling dress, thinking the frontier would offer a fresh start after tragedy took everything from her back in Boston. What she found instead was 3 days without food and a choice that would have scandalized proper society. But sometimes, friends, the good Lord works in mysterious ways, and what starts as pure survival can turn into something neither party expected. This is their story, just as it was told to me. Well, Clara was holding on to that rough pine railing outside Brennan's sawmill like it was the only thing keeping her upright, which it pretty much was. 3 days without a proper meal will do that to a body. The smell of fat back and beans from the workers' noon dinner drifted out, and Lord have mercy, it about drove her wild with hunger. Through that grimy window, she could see Thomas Brennan, the mill owner himself, eating his dinner right there at his desk. Salt pork and cornbread if her eyes weren't playing tricks. The big saw was screaming through pine logs outside, that high whine that sets your teeth on edge, and she had to lean against the door frame just to steady herself. Now, Clara had already been turned away from every blessed establishment in town. The hotel lady took one look at her soft hands and said, "Honey, you ain't cut out for chambermaid work." The mercantile owner wanted references she didn't have. Even Mrs. Fielding at the boarding house wanted payment up front for another night, which Clara couldn't manage with just 3 coins left in her purse. The door stuck something fierce when she pushed it, had to put her shoulder into it, and when it gave way, she near about tumbled into the office. Mr. Brennan looked up from his ledger, took in her dusty traveling dress, good quality but showing hard wear, and she could see him figuring she was another Eastern lady who'd thought the West would be easier pickings. "Help you, miss?" His voice was flat as yesterday's biscuit. "I'm looking for work, Mr. Brennan." She kept her chin up, though she was getting mighty light-headed. "Any work at all. I write a fine hand, can keep books, cook." "Got no work for ladies here." He went back to his salt pork, tearing off a piece with his fingers like she wasn't even standing there. Well now, that just about did it. But pride doesn't fill an empty stomach, so she pressed on. "Sir, I can see from here your desk needs organizing something terrible. Papers everywhere, receipts falling on the floor. I reckon a lumber business requires proper documentation." He stopped chewing, gave her a second look. Not the kind that made a woman nervous, but calculating-like. "You're that Boston woman staying in Mrs. Fielding's place." "Was staying. Can't afford another night." Something shifted in his face then. He set down that salt pork, wiped his hands on a piece of cloth that had seen better days. "Sit yourself down." She sat, grateful as could be, her legs shaking like a newborn colt's. He pushed a tin cup across the desk. Coffee, black as tar and probably just as bitter. "Can you really handle accounts?" "My father was, well, no sense airing that dirty laundry. I kept books for a shipping concern back east." "Why'd you leave?" Now there was a question. But the truth of it all, William dead of consumption, her daddy's business gone bust, the whispers and shame, that was more than this stranger needed to know. Personal circumstances required a change. He made a sound, might have been a laugh. Personal circumstances. He stood up, walked over to the window where the men were wrestling logs onto the saw platform. "Miss, what's your name?" "Whitfield. Clara Whitfield." "Miss Whitfield, I got myself a problem. The Territorial Bank won't give contracts to unmarried men. Says we're not stable enough. Lost 2 good contracts last month to Stokes on account of him having a wife." She waited, not quite following his meaning. "I need those contracts to keep 40 men working. Stokes is trying to buy me out, and Morton at the bank is helping him along with these blamed rules." "I don't see what this has to do with—" "Got no work for ladies," he said again, turning from the window. And then she saw it in his face. the same desperation she figured was showing in hers. But I need a wife. Today. Before sunset when the justice leaves for Denver. Well, if that didn't just beat all. The words hung there between them, heavy as lead. You're suggesting... Her voice cracked like dried leather. Marriage. Legal and proper. You get room, board, and $12 monthly for household money. I get my contracts. Separate bedrooms, mind you. You cook, keep house, handle these blamed ledgers since you say you can. No other expectations. Clara felt the floor tilting under her feet. Through that window, she could see the sun hanging over the mountains. Maybe 4 hours till sunset. This is plumb crazy. This is business. He pulled out his ledger, showed her the figures. Lost $800 in contracts last month alone. I'll lose the mill by Christmas if this keeps up. Her stomach cramped up something fierce, and she had to grip the edge of that desk. $12 monthly. Room and board. Safety from the kind of offers a desperate woman might get. I need to think on it. Think all you want. Justice leaves at sunset. He pulled out his pocket watch. 3 hours and 40 minutes to be exact. She stood up too quick. The room started spinning, and she had to grab the desk to keep from falling. When'd you last eat? His voice was different now, quieter. 3 days ago. He cursed under his breath, opened a drawer and pulled out a cloth bundle. Cornbread and dried apple slices. Pushed it across to her. Eat first, then decide. But Miss Clara, I ain't a bad man. I'm not looking to trap you or cause you harm. I just need to save my mill. And you need somewhere safe to land. Maybe we can help each other out. She took that cornbread, ate it slow, even though her body was screaming for her to gobble it down. The sun kept sliding toward those mountains, marking time she didn't have. If I say yes, she said careful-like. Truly separate rooms? Lock your door if you want. I won't ever try the handle. And the books. I'd really handle them? Lord knows they need it. Haven't balanced them proper in 6 months. She looked at that chaos of papers, the disaster of his bookkeeping. At least that was something she could fix, something she could control. I need to see the house first. He almost smiled, just the corner of his mouth twitching up. Fair enough. As they walked through that mill yard, every blessed worker stopped to stare. She kept her chin up, though her legs still shook. The house stood about a quarter-mile off. Good, solid structure of logs and milled boards, 2 stories, with smoke drifting from the chimney. Inside, it was about what she expected. Everything covered in a fine layer of sawdust, but there were 2 bedrooms with the main room between them. A good iron stove, a pump in the kitchen that actually worked when she tried it. Well? He stood in the doorway, that pocket watch in his hand again. 3 hours till sunset. 3 days since she'd eaten proper. 3 months since William passed. 3 months since her whole world fell apart. I need to fetch my things from the boarding house. Is that a yes? Well now, what choice did she really have? That's a yes, Mr. Brennan. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Well, they went back into that office, and Thomas pulled up a second chair to his desk, shoving aside a mess of invoices that went tumbling to the floor. Neither one of them bothered to pick them up. Terms. He spread his hands flat on that scarred desk. Working hands they were, thick with calluses from handling lumber all day. You cook, clean, keep the books. $12 monthly for household expenses. Separate rooms, like I said. 15. The word popped out before Clara could stop herself. His eyebrows went up. You're negotiating? Right now? A good bookkeeper would save you more than $5 monthly, Mr. Brennan. I reckon you know that. He grabbed a pencil stub, did some quick figuring on the back of an old envelope. $12. That's my final offer, and it's generous. She nodded. Her throat felt dry as sawdust. What else you want? Sunday mornings for church. I keep my own name on everything except legal papers. Done. He was writing now, making a list in big block letters. My turn. You don't ask about my past, I don't ask about yours. Well, now that just wouldn't work. Clara's fingers found the frayed edge of her sleeve, worrying at it. That's not possible. He looked up, sharp-like. If folks are going to believe this is legitimate, we need to know basic facts about each other. Her voice got steadier as she found her footing. That banker Morton is going to ask questions. Your mill workers, the church ladies. Thomas set down that pencil, waited. My fiancé died 3 months back. William Hartley. The consumption took him. Each word dropped heavy. My daddy's shipping business went bust. Complete bankruptcy. William's family broke our engagement after he passed, said he wasn't in his right mind when he proposed. Thomas's face didn't change none. Boston society turned on you. My own cousins suggested I disappear. For the family's reputation, they said. And this bookkeeping experience? I kept Daddy's books 2 years. Helped William, too. He was starting an import business before he took sick. She looked him straight in the eye. I can fix your accounts, Mr. Brennan. That's not boasting. He stood up, walked over to that chaos of papers covering every blessed surface, pulled out a ledger from the bottom of a pile. Prove it. That ledger was a pure disaster. 3 different hands writing in it, numbers crossed out and written over, no running tallies anywhere. Clara pulled it close, grabbed the pencil. Your May deliveries don't match your June receipts. Someone's shorting you. Her finger tracked down the columns. Here, Morrison's orders. He's paying pine prices but taking oak. Thomas leaned over her shoulder, close enough she could smell pipe tobacco and sawdust on him. Her hand shook as she wrote the corrected figures. That's $40 difference monthly. $43.50. She turned pages, scanning quick. And here, the bank's interest calculation? Dead wrong. You've overpaid by... She did the figures in the margin. $18 just this quarter. He straightened up slow. Outside, that mill whistle blew. 3 o'clock. The sun hung lower now, maybe 3 fingers above the mountain ridge. All right, Miss Whitfield. He pulled out his pocket watch again. 2 hours, 20 minutes. You still need your things from Mrs. Fielding's? 1 valise is all. Won't take but a minute. I'll drive you. Need to stop at the bank anyway. Tell Morton about the marriage. Make sure he can't find some new rule to deny them contracts. Marriage. That word made her stomach clench up tight. The justice, will he need witnesses? His wife usually serves. She's discreet enough. Thomas grabbed his coat from a peg. Clara, one more thing you should know. She turned at the door. My brother Jacob drowned when he was 12. I was supposed to be watching him. The words came out flat, matter of fact, but she heard something underneath, a weight he'd been carrying a long time. Before she could think what to say, he was through the door, calling for someone to ready the wagon. Clara stood there frozen, understanding sudden-like that his losses might match her own. Through that window, she saw Mrs. Morton from the bank walking past, her sharp eyes taking in Clara standing there in Thomas's office. By tomorrow morning, the whole blessed town would know. Well now, the ride to fetch Clara's valise went quick enough. Thomas waited in the wagon while she climbed them narrow stairs at Mrs. Fielding's boarding house one last time. Her room, if you could call a space barely big enough for a cot and washstand a room, smelled of stale air and old wood. She packed her few belongings, 2 dresses, some undergarments that had seen better days, her mother's Bible, and the silver brush that was the last thing of value she owned. Mrs. Fielding stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed. Heard you was seen at the mill. Yes, ma'am. Also heard Thomas Brennan's taking you to see Justice Harwick. News traveled faster than wildfire in Copper Ridge. Clara just nodded, set 50 cents on the hall table for the 2 nights she'd stayed. Keep your money, Mrs. Fielding said, but her eyes were calculating. You'll need it more than me, I reckon." Outside, Thomas helped her up into the wagon. His hand on her elbow was steady, impersonal. They stopped at the bank where Thomas went inside for all of 3 minutes. When he came out, his jaw was set hard. "Morton knows. Says the marriage certificate needs to be filed by close of business today, or the contracts are void." The justice lived in a white frame house near the church. Mrs. Harwick answered the door, her face pinched tight as a new boot. She looked Clara up and down, taking in the dusty dress, the hastily pinned hair. "Judge Harwick's in his study. I suppose you'll be wanting me to witness." "If you'd be so kind," Thomas said. The study smelled of pipe tobacco and old leather. Justice Harwick sat behind a mahogany desk that must have cost a fortune to ship from back east. He was already filling out papers, his pen scratching across the certificate. "Stand here." He pointed to a spot in front of the desk. "Both of you." Clara stood beside Thomas, close enough to feel the heat coming off him. He'd been working in the sun all morning. She could smell sawdust and honest sweat on him. "You got a ring?" the justice asked. Thomas reached in his vest pocket, pulled out a thin gold band. "It was my mother's." Clara's throat closed up. "I can't take your mother's ring." She'd want it used. But when Clara shook her head, he put it back in his pocket without argument. Justice Harwick cleared his throat. "Well then, you both here of your own free will?" "Yes, sir," they said together. "Thomas Brennan, you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife?" "I do." "Clara Whitfield, you take this man to be your lawful wedded husband?" Her mouth was dry as dust. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you man and wife." The justice paused, looking at them standing there stiff as fence posts. "I suppose you can shake hands?" Thomas extended his hand. Clara took it. His palm was rough, warm, steady. They shook once, formal-like, then let go. "Sign here." The justice pointed to the certificate. Clara signed first, her Eastern education showing in the flowing script. Thomas signed after, his letters blocky and careful as a schoolboy's. Mrs. Harwick signed as witness, her mouth pursed like she'd been sucking lemons. "That'll be $2, Justice Harwick said. Thomas paid. They walked out, married, legal as anything, the sun just touching the mountain peaks. The wagon ride to the house was pure silence. Clara sat rigid on the bench, gripping the side when they hit ruts. The house looked different now, knowing it would be her home. The last of the sunlight caught the windows, turning them gold. Inside, Thomas lit a kerosene lamp. The shadows jumped and flickered on the walls. "Your room." He pointed to a door off the main room. "Used to be storage, but I cleared it this afternoon while you were packing." The room was small but clean. An iron bedstead with a corn husk mattress, a washstand with a china pitcher and bowl, hooks on the wall for clothes, a rag rug on the pine floor. The window looked out toward the mountains. "There's a bolt on the inside of the door," Thomas said from the doorway, "like I promised." She nodded, set her valise on the bed. "I rise at 4:30, start the stove, make coffee. You don't need to be up till 5:30 if you don't want. Breakfast at 6. I take dinner at the mill at noon. Supper's at 6 in the evening." "I understand." "Privy's out back. There's a chamber pot under the bed if you need it at night. Bath day's Saturday. I'll heat water for you first." Everything laid out neat as a business contract, which it was, she reminded herself. "I'll start supper," she said. The kitchen was better stocked than she'd expected. Salt pork in the larder, potatoes in a bin, onions hanging from the rafters. She found flour, lard, even some preserved peaches. She fried the salt pork, boiled potatoes, made biscuits. The biscuits came out hard as rocks. She'd forgotten how different cooking was at this altitude. They ate standing at the counter, neither one wanting to claim a seat at the table. Thomas chewed them rock-hard biscuits without comment. The only sounds were forks against plates, the wind rattling the windows, the pop of sap in the stove. When they finished, Clara washed the dishes while Thomas went to his room. She could hear him moving around in there, boots hitting the floor, the creak of the bed ropes. She dried the last plate, put it away, careful-like. Her own room was cold. She changed into her nightgown quick as she could, dove under the quilts. The corn-husk mattress rustled with every movement. Through the thin walls, she could hear Thomas's breathing, the house settling, a coyote calling somewhere in the distance. She lay there in the dark, legally married to a man she'd known for exactly 7 hours. Her stomach was full for the first time in days. She had a roof over her head, a bolt on her door, $12 a month coming. Then she heard it, Thomas's footsteps crossing his room. They stopped at his door. The knob rattled slightly, like he was resting his hand on it. Clara held her breath, but the footsteps moved away. She heard his bed creak as he settled back into it. What had he been thinking, standing there at his door? Was he already regretting this bargain? Or was he, like her, wondering what in the Lord's name they'd just done? Well now, that first Sunday as Mrs. Thomas Brennan came mighty quick. Clara woke to the sound of church bells carrying on the morning air, first Baptist, then Methodist, each trying to outdo the other. She lay there a minute, listening to Thomas moving around the kitchen, the coffee pot clanging on the stove. Her good dress hung on the wall hook, a rip in the hem she hadn't noticed before. She sat on the bed edge in her nightgown, squinting at that tear in the early light. Her sewing basket was still packed. She found needle and thread, but the only patch material she had was from a flour sack she'd saved. The writing on it, "Pride of Kansas Best Flour," would show if she wasn't careful. She turned the fabric inside out, stitched it neat as she could. Her hands shook some. First time at church as a married woman, every soul in Copper Ridge would be watching, judging, deciding if this marriage was real or just what it was, a business arrangement. Thomas knocked on her door. "Coffee's ready if you want it." She dressed quick, pinned up her hair proper. The little mirror over the washstand showed a face too pale, too thin. She pinched her cheeks for color, bit her lips. It would have to do. In the kitchen, Thomas stood at the window in his Sunday suit, black wool, brushed clean but shiny at the elbows and seat from wear. He'd slicked his hair back with pomade. The coffee cup in his hand trembled just a hair. "You nervous too?" she asked, before she could stop herself. He turned. His eyes took in her mended dress, the flour sack patch barely showing. "They'll talk. They're already talking." That's true enough. He poured her coffee, black and strong. "We should leave in 10 minutes. Like to get there early, get my usual, pew." They walked to church side by side, but not touching. The morning was cool, dew still sparkling on the grass. Other folks were walking too, families grouped together, children running ahead. Every blessed one of them turned to stare. "Morning, Brennan," called Jake from the mill. His wife's eyes near about popped out of her head. "Morning, Jake. Mrs. Patterson." Thomas touched his hat brim. The Methodist church sat white and proper at the end of Main Street, its steeple pointing straight to heaven. The doors stood open, organ music drifting out. Mrs. Hartley was playing. Clara recognized the hymn, Rock of Ages. Thomas guided her up the steps with just his fingertips on her elbow. The touch burned through her sleeve. Inside, the church smelled of beeswax and old wood, ladies' rose water and men's hair tonic. Thomas led her down the aisle to a pew on the right, 5 rows from the front. His pew, where he'd sat alone every Sunday for who knows how long. Clara slid in, arranged her skirts. Thomas sat beside her, a careful 6 inches between them. But that 6 inches might as well have been a mile for all the attention it drew. She could feel eyes boring into the back of her head. Whispers hissed like steam from a kettle. "That's her, the Boston woman. Married the very day they met. Desperate, I heard. What kind of woman? Reverend Mills climbed into the pulpit. He was a thin man with deep-set eyes that seemed to see right through folks. His gaze fixed on Clara and Thomas. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Before we begin, I see we have a new member of our congregation, Mrs. Thomas Brennan. We welcome you to our fellowship. Every head swiveled to stare. Clara kept her eyes forward, her back straight as a board. Our scripture today comes from Corinthians. Let all things be done decently and in order. The Reverend's voice carried to every corner. We live in trying times. The territory is wild, untamed, but we must not let circumstances cause us to abandon propriety. The Lord calls us to proper courtship, proper marriage, proper behavior in all things. Thomas's jaw muscle twitched. His hands gripped the hymnal so tight his knuckles went white. The sermon went on for what felt like hours. Every word seemed aimed at them, about rushing into things, about the sanctity of marriage, about how the devil tempts folks to take shortcuts. Clara's face burned hot. She could feel sweat trickling down her back despite the cool morning. When they finally stood for the closing hymn, Thomas shared his hymnal with her. His hand brushed hers as they both held it. She could smell his pomade, the starch in his collar, the soap he'd shaved with. The words of blessed assurance stuck in her throat. After the service, folks gathered outside like they always did, groups forming and reforming. Thomas kept his hand on Clara's elbow as they walked through the crowd. Brennan. Banker Morton stood in their path, his wife beside him with a face that could sour milk. Heard you made it official. We did. Thomas's voice was steady. Clara, this is Mr. Morton from the bank. Morton, my wife. Morton's eyes traveled over Clara, assessing her like she was collateral on a loan. Mrs. Brennan, from Boston, I hear. Yes, sir. And what brings a Boston lady to Copper Ridge? Before Clara could answer, Thomas stepped forward slightly. Same thing that brought all of us here. A new start. Mrs. Morton sniffed. How sudden it all was. Why, just Thursday you were a bachelor, Thomas. Thursday I was. Today I'm not. Thomas's tone didn't invite further comment, but Mrs. Morton wasn't done. We really must get better acquainted, Mrs. Brennan. You must tell us all about your people back east. Your family connections. The hidden question was clear as glass. Who are you really, and what are you hiding? Perhaps another time, Thomas said. We need to get home. They walked away, but Clara could feel the stares following them. Her stomach churned. This was just the beginning. I need to stop at Henderson's, she said quiet-like, for thread, and maybe look at fabric. Thomas nodded. I'll wait outside. Henderson's general store was busy with after-church shoppers. The bell over the door jangled as Clara entered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Mrs. Donnelly stood at the fabric counter with 3 other merchant wives, their heads together like conspirators. Clara walked to the notion section, found the thread she needed, but she also wanted to look at fabric. Her 2 dresses wouldn't last forever, and with $12 monthly, she could maybe manage a few yards of calico. She moved to the fabric bolts. The women stepped back, giving her room, but their eyes never left her. That's nice goods, Mrs. Donnelly said, pointing to a bolt of gray wool Clara was touching. $2 a yard. Clara's hand jerked back. $2 was highway robbery for wool. The calico's more suitable, Mrs. Donnelly continued, her voice sweet as syrup. 30 cents a yard. More appropriate for someone in your situation. My situation? Well, a quick marriage like yours. One assumes there isn't much security in it. Best not to overspend when you might be moving on soon. The other women tittered behind their hands. Clara's face burned. She reached for the calico, but her hand stopped. There on the next shelf was a bolt of blue cotton, good quality but not fancy. 75 cents a yard. I'll take 3 yards of the blue. she heard herself say. That's quite expensive for 3 yards. Clara met Mrs. Donnelly's eyes straight on. Mrs. Henderson cut the fabric in silence. $2.25. That was near a fifth of her monthly household money, but Clara pulled the coins from her purse. The doorbell jangled. Thomas stood there taking in the scene, the women clustered like hens, Clara at the counter with her fabric. You finding what you need? He asked. Yes, just paying. He walked over, saw the fabric, the price Mr. Henderson was writing down. Without a word, Thomas pulled out his wallet. I'll get it. It's household expense, Clara said quietly. From my $12. Not this. He put $3 on the counter. This is my wife needing a church dress. That's my responsibility. The word wife rang in that store like a bell. Mrs. Donnelly's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Thomas picked up the wrapped fabric, touched Clara's elbow. Ready? They walked out together. Behind them, the store exploded in whispers. Clara's elbow burned where his fingers rested, but she didn't pull away. Not until they were out of sight of the windows. You didn't need to do that, she said. Yes, I did. He handed her the fabric. They need to see I'll protect what's mine, even if... He stopped. Even if it wasn't real. The words hung there unspoken. They walked home in silence, but it was different from before. Something had shifted in that store. Thomas had claimed her publicly, defended her, and she'd stood up to Mrs. Donnelly, hadn't backed down. As they reached the house, Clara saw something that made her stomach drop. There on the front step was a basket with a cloth over it. A gift, maybe, from a neighbor? But when Thomas lifted the cloth, there were just rocks inside. Rocks and a note in crude printing. Boston trash and her fool. Thomas crumpled the note, but not before Clara saw his hands shaking with anger. Not embarrassment, anger. Who would... she started. Doesn't matter. He threw the rocks out into the yard, one by one. Let them think what they want. But it did matter. Someone had come to their home while they were at church, left this ugly message. Someone wanted them to know they were watching, judging, waiting for them to fail. What else might they do? Well now, come Monday morning, Clara stood in that mill office doorway at dawn, 3 weeks into this marriage arrangement. Thomas was already out in the mill yard. She could hear him hollering at somebody about stacking the green lumber wrong. Good. She worked better alone. That desk looked worse than ever. Thomas kept promising to let her tackle them books proper, but every blessed evening he'd find some excuse. Too tired, too late, too much else needed doing. This morning, she hadn't asked permission. The first drawer stuck something terrible. She yanked harder. The whole thing came flying out, sending papers all over the floor like snow. The smell of old tobacco and spilled ink rose up strong enough to make her nose wrinkle. She got down on her knees, started gathering them up. Receipts, IOUs, scraps of orders written on anything handy, even one on the back of a whiskey label, Lord help us. Her fingers found a receipt from Morrison Lumber, dated 2 months back. She squinted at the figures. Then she found another from Morrison, different date. And another. Clara spread them across the floor, putting them in order by date. The morning light coming through that grimy window wasn't much, but it was enough to see the pattern. Morrison wasn't just shorting random deliveries. Every third order, regular as clockwork, he paid 15% less than quoted. Small enough to miss in all this chaos, big enough to add up to. She grabbed a pencil, started figuring. Her stomach got tighter with every sum. $460 over 6 months. That was more than most folks saw in a year. The door banged open hard enough to rattle the windows. Thomas stood there, sawdust in his hair, blood seeping through a rag wrapped around his left hand. What in blazes are you doing? My job. She didn't look up from them receipts. Morrison's been stealing from you, regular and deliberate. Morrison's one of my best customers. Look here. She thrust the papers at him, not caring about the blood dripping on them. Every third order, 15% short, like clockwork. He took the papers with his good hand, blood from the other hand smearing the edges. She watched his face change as he read, saw that jaw muscle start twitching the way it did when he was mad. That son of a... He caught himself, remembered he was talking to a woman. $400? $460, plus the interest you could have earned on that money. She stood up, her knees creaking from the floor, grabbed his bleeding hand without thinking twice about it, unwrapped that dirty rag. A nasty gash across his palm, still bleeding pretty good. This needs cleaning. She pulled out her handkerchief, pressed it tight against the cut. His hand was warm under hers, rough with calluses. Forget my hand. You're telling me Morton's been stealing? And the bank? The bank's been cheating you too. She kept pressure on his cut while reaching for the loan documents with her free hand. These, at least, were tied together with string. See here? They're compounding interest daily instead of monthly like the contract says. Show me. She led him to the desk, still holding his hand, cleared a space with her elbow, started writing out the calculations with her free hand. Principal, rate, time, compound versus simple. His blood kept dripping, but she kept her handkerchief pressed tight. $93, she said. They owe you $93 in overcharged interest. 93. He stared at the numbers, then at her hand holding his. Clara, that's 3 months' wages for a mill hand. It's theft is what it is, plain and simple. She released his hand, stepped back. When's the last time anybody went through these books proper? My brother used to. He stopped, that closed look coming over his face. Before he died, 8 years ago. 8 years. 8 years of small thefts adding up to thousands. She looked at that disaster of papers and felt something cold settle in her belly. Thomas, how much do you reckon you've lost all told? I don't. He picked up a handful of receipts, let them fall through his fingers. Thousands, probably. We need to go through everything, every receipt, every invoice, every single piece of paper. Not now. He moved toward the door. I gotta deal with Morrison first. Wait. She grabbed his sleeve. If you go after him now, he'll just deny everything. We need documentation. Everything copied out proper and verified. That'll take days. Maybe a week. The cotton of his shirt was rough under her fingers, warm from his body. But then you'll have proof. Legal proof that'll hold up. He turned to look at her full on. This close, she could see how tired he was. The weight he'd been carrying alone all these years. You do all that work? For $12 a month? It's worth it to me. The words came out fiercer than she meant. Nobody steals from... She caught herself. From my husband, she'd almost said. From my employer. Something shifted in his face, went soft for just a second. All right. But first you need to learn about lumber. Can't verify orders if you don't know oak from pine. Right now? Right now. He rewrapped his hand with that bloody handkerchief. Come on. The mill yard was pure chaos. Men shouting, the big saw screaming through logs, the splash as more logs rolled down from the pond. Thomas led her past it all to a covered shed where boards stood in neat stacks, sorted by type and size. Here. He pulled out a pine board, held it to the light coming through the shed's open side. See the grain? Wide and straight. Pine grows fast, makes soft wood. Good for framing, takes paint well. His fingers traced the grain lines, gentle despite them rough calluses. Clara found herself watching his hands, the careful way he touched that wood. Now oak. He pulled out a different board, heavier. She took it when he handed it over, surprised at the weight. Tight grain, see? Grows slow. Hard wood. Costs 3 times what pine does. That's what Morrison's been doing, ordering oak, paying for pine. Exactly. He pulled out another board. Smell this one. She leaned close, breathed in. Sweet smell, almost like cherries. That's rot starting. Fungus gets in the wood, Spreads if you don't catch it. He took her hand, placed it on the board, his hand covering hers. Feel here? Press hard. The wood gave under her finger, soft and spongy. Never ship rot. Man's reputation dies faster than fungus spreads. He pulled out another board. This one? She smelled it, pressed along the edge, examined the grain. Oak. No rot, but there's something... Her finger found a thin crack. Here. Good eye. He smiled then, quick and real, gone before she could be sure she saw it. That's why Morrison thinks he can cheat me. Figures I don't check every board personal. Do you? Used to. Haven't had time lately. He looked at all them stacks of lumber, thousands and thousands of boards. Jacob checked every order personal-like, said our name went on every board that left this mill. There was again, that weight when he said his brother's name. Teach me to check them proper. That's not, you're doing the books. Teach me anyway, please. He studied her face a long minute. All right, but first, we eat. Can't learn lumber on an empty stomach. Back at the house, Clara fried eggs while Thomas sliced bread. They ate standing at the counter like always, too hungry for ceremony. Between bites, he explained board feet calculations, wholesale versus retail pricing, the difference between heartwood and sapwood. Heartwood's from the center of the tree, he said, pointing with his fork. Deadwood, but harder, darker, worth more. Sapwood's the outer layers, still growing when cut. How do you tell them apart? Color, mostly. Sometimes smell. He pushed his empty plate aside. Tomorrow I'll show you cedar versus redwood. Whole different animals. Tomorrow. The word sat between them, ordinary but somehow full of promise. 3 weeks they'd been married, and this was the first time either had made plans for the next day. Clara stood to clear the plates. At the sink, she glanced back. Thomas was reading the notes she'd made on brown paper, pencil in hand, adding little drawings to help explain things. The afternoon light through the window caught the sawdust in his hair, turned it gold. Clara. She turned. The books. When you go through them all. He set down the pencil, wouldn't meet her eyes. You might find other things. Discrepancies. What kind of things? I've been sending money east, every month, to an account in Albany. She waited, dish still in her hand. There's no woman or anything like that. He still wouldn't look at her. But I need you to leave those transactions alone. Don't record them. Don't question them. The dish slipped from her fingers, hit the floor with a crash that made them both jump. Well now, that dish shattered into a dozen pieces across the floor. Clara stared at them fragments, her mind still on Thomas's words about Albany. She bent to gather them up, and the room tilted sideways. Her hand shot out for the counter but missed. The broken china bit into her palm as she caught herself on the floor. Clara? Thomas's boots crossed the floor quick-like. His hands gripped her arms, pulled her up to standing. The kitchen spun lazy and slow, all the colors running together like watercolors in rain. I'm all right. But her legs felt like water. Just tired is all. You're burning up. His palm pressed against her forehead, rough and cool. How long you been feeling poorly? I'm not. The floor rushed up again. Her knees hit the pine boards hard. The laundry basket sat by the door, sheets twisted up like rope. Had she been doing laundry? When? This morning? Yesterday? She couldn't rightly remember. Thomas's arms slid under her knees and behind her back. The world lurched as he lifted her clean off the ground. She didn't weigh nothing at all, seemed like. Or maybe he was stronger than that lean frame suggested. His shirt smelled of pine sap and honest sweat. Her head fell against his shoulder without her say-so. The stairs creaked under his weight. Each step jarred through her skull like hammer blows. Her room. She should say something about him being in her room, but her tongue felt thick and useless as old leather. He pulled back the quilt. Cool air hit her skin. She was soaked clean through with sweat she hadn't even noticed. Her work dress clung to her like a second skin. "Need to get the doctor." His voice came from far away, like he was calling from the bottom of a well. "Clara, can you hear me?" She tried to answer. Her mouth opened, but all that came out was a moan that didn't sound like her at all. Heat crawled under her skin like red ants, biting and burning. Footsteps running down the stairs, door slamming, opening again. Different footsteps now, quick little steps. Mrs. Henley from 2 houses down? Hands at her buttons, working them loose, peeling away that soaked dress. A nightgown sliding over her head, soft cotton against her burning skin. Lord have mercy, she's burning alive. That was Mrs. Henley for sure. "Get ice from your ice house, Mr. Brennan. Chips, small as you can break them." Thomas's boots again, running. The bed dipped as Mrs. Henley sat beside her. A wet cloth on Clara's forehead, so cold it burned worse than the fever. "William?" Clara's eyes wouldn't focus right. Everything was blurry. "William, there's blood on your handkerchief again." "Shh now, dear, just rest." But William was coughing in the next room. She could hear it clear as day, that wet, tearing sound that meant his lungs were giving out. The handkerchiefs would be ruined. She needed to wash them before the blood set permanent, but her hands wouldn't move when she told them to. Ice against her lips. She sucked at it desperate-like. Her throat felt full of broken glass. The ice melted, trickled down, but it wasn't near enough to touch the fire burning inside. "Doctor's coming." Thomas's voice, closer now. "Riding fast as he can." Time got strange then. Dark, then light, light, then dark. Someone spooning broth into her mouth. Most of it dribbled down her chin. Hands wiping it away gentle-like. Medicine bitter on her tongue. Laudanum? No, something else. Something that made her stomach cramp and heave. "The sheets need changing again." Mrs. Henley sounded bone-tired. "3rd time today." "I'll do it, Thomas. You go on home, get some rest." "Mr. Brennan, it ain't proper." "She's my wife." The words came out hard, final. Hands lifting her while she floated like a feather. Fabric whispering as sheets got pulled away. Fresh ones tucked in, smelling of lye soap and sunshine. But they turned to heat quick enough, soaked through in minutes. "Jacob?" Her voice came out cracked and strange. "Jacob, don't go to the pond. The ice is too thin. Can't you hear it cracking?" "Shh." A hand smoothing her hair back from her face. "Just sleep now." But Jacob was already running across that white field, his 12-year-old legs pumping hard. She tried to call out, warn him. The ice cracked, just like Thomas's voice cracked when he said his brother's name. More medicine forced between her lips. A mustard plaster on her chest, burning through to her backbone. She clawed at it until hands caught hers, held them still. "Please," Thomas's voice, rough and broken. "Please, just fight this." She wanted to tell him she was fighting. Every breath was a battle against the weight on her chest, but William was coughing again, and the blood was everywhere now, on the sheets, the walls, dripping from the ceiling like red rain. "It's been 3 days. That was Dr. Morrison, his voice low and serious. "The fever should have broken by now. What else can we do?" "Pray, son. That's all that's left." Clara's eyes opened, when had they closed, to find Thomas in the chair beside her bed. His head was bowed, hands clasped together tight. His lips moved silent-like. She'd never seen him pray before, didn't even know he knew how. Her hand moved without her telling it to, reaching out, weak as a newborn kitten. Her fingers found his sleeve, gripped it best they could. His head snapped up, eyes red-rimmed with no sleep, 3 days of beard shadowing his jaw. "Clara?" She tried to speak, only a whisper came out. "Not William." "No, Thomas." He covered her hand with both of his. "You're in Copper Ridge. You're safe." Safe. That word meant something important, but she couldn't recall what. Her fingers tightened on his sleeve, He didn't pull away. The consumption took him. Words spilled out of her mouth without her permission. 3 months he coughed blood. So many handkerchiefs to wash. His mother said it was my fault. Said I brought sickness from the docks where Daddy worked. That's not how consumption works. She said God was punishing me for being prideful, for thinking I was good enough for her son. Tears leaked from her eyes, hot as the fever itself. Maybe she was right. She wasn't. His hands squeezed hers, almost too tight. Listen to me. Disease don't care about pride or punishment. It just is. Like drowning? His hands went still. What? Jacob drowned. You were supposed to watch him. She wasn't sure why she was saying this. The words just came. But ice don't care about supposed to. His breath caught sharp. For a long spell, nothing but quiet. Then his hand moved to her forehead, checking the fever. You need to rest. I can see him sometimes. William. He stands in that corner and coughs. She turned her head, looking. He's there right now. Thomas looked where she pointed. His jaw went tight. There's nobody there, Clara. He wants me to come with him. No. The word came out harsh enough to make her jump. Thomas gripped her hand again, hard. You're staying here. You're staying. She wanted to argue, but sleep was pulling her down like deep water. The last thing she saw clear was Thomas in that chair, their hands still joined, his head bowing again to pray. When she woke proper, truly woke, the room was bright with afternoon sun. Her nightgown was soaked through, but with sweat, not fever. The corner was empty. No ghost William, no bloody handkerchiefs. Just Thomas, asleep in that chair, still in the same clothes from how many days ago? His hand stretched out toward hers across the space between chair and bed. She studied his face while he couldn't see her looking. The exhaustion had carved deep lines around his mouth. His shirt was the same one from when she broke the dish. She could see the stain from his cut hand. But she remembered other things too. His voice. Please, just fight this. His hands holding hers. His prayers in the dark. She must have moved because his eyes opened, found her right away. The fever broke? She nodded. Her throat felt scraped raw. He stood up quick, pulled his hand back like her skin burned him. I'll get water, and Mrs. Henley, she'll want to. You need... He backed toward the door, suddenly awkward as a schoolboy. Don't try to get up yet. But before he could leave, she had to know. Thomas, those payments to Albany, is that where your parents live? His hand froze on the door handle. His shoulders went rigid. And she knew, even before he answered, that she'd touched something that hurt worse than any fever. Well, now, Thomas stood frozen at that door, his knuckles gone white on the handle. My mother. Just my mother. The words came out flat. Father's been gone 5 years. Then he was through the door before Clara could ask another blessed thing. She lay back against them pillows, working through what he'd just said. His mother in Albany. Secret payments every month. The way his whole body went stiff when she'd asked. Mrs. Henley showed up quick, with fresh water and clean linens. She fussed and tutted, helped Clara wash and change into a clean nightgown. But when Mrs. Henley left, Clara pushed herself up out of that bed. Her legs shook like a newborn colt's, but she was tired of laying there like an invalid. She made it to the washstand, gripped its edges while the room settled down. Her reflection in that little mirror was something to see. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, hair matted with dried sweat. She poured water in the basin, washed her face and hands. Even that little bit of effort left her winded. By the time she got dressed, just a plain shift and her oldest day dress, and made it to the kitchen, the sun was sitting low in the west. Thomas stood at the stove with his back to her, stirring something in a pot. You should be in bed. He didn't turn around. I've been in bed 4 days. Any longer and I'll go crazy. She lowered herself, careful-like, into a kitchen chair. Every joint ached. He ladled soup into a bowl, beef tea, thin and clear, and set it in front of her with one of them special invalid spoons, the kind with a deeper bowl. "Mrs. Henley made it this morning. Said you need to take it slow, small amount." That first sip burned her raw throat, but she took another anyway. Thomas sat across from her with his own bowl, real soup with vegetables and chunks of meat. They ate without talking, spoons clicking against china. "The books," she said finally. "Morrison's theft. Did you?" "Leave it for now." "But the evidence." "Clara." He set down his spoon. "You near about died." The words sat heavy between them. She took another sip of beef tea, felt it warm her from inside. "I need to work. Can't just sit here doing nothing." He studied her face, then got up and fetched a ledger from the office. Not the main accounts, but something smaller. "Inventory lists, nothing too taxing. You can work from the table here." She opened it up. His handwriting, blocky and careful. Lists of lumber types, quantities, prices. Her finger traced down the columns, finding patterns. "These cedar prices are wrong." "What?" He leaned over to look, close enough she could feel the warmth coming off him. "Cedar should run 20% higher than pine. You got it marked at 15. He grabbed a pencil, refigured, cursed soft under his breath. 6 months of undercharging. Lord Almighty. "Who taught you pricing?" "My father, at first. Then Jacob took over the books when he turned 10. He was..." Thomas sat back down heavy. "He had a head for numbers. Like you." Clara waited, but he didn't go on. She went back to the ledger, found 3 more pricing errors in the next few pages. Each one made Thomas's jaw tighten a little more. "How'd you learn bookkeeping?" he asked, sudden-like. "Really learn it proper, I mean." She set down the pencil. "William taught me. Before the consumption took hold, he was building an import business, tea and spices from India. He said I had a mind for numbers, shouldn't waste it just because I was born female. Progressive thinking for a Boston man. He was different." She traced a water stain on the table with her finger. His mother hated it, said it was unnatural, women doing men's work. Said a lot of things. My mother would have liked it. Thomas stood, poured coffee from the pot on the stove, set a cup in front of her without asking if she wanted it. "She kept the mill books before Jacob, taught both of us our numbers." "Is that why you send—" "She's in a sanitarium." The words came fast, like ripping off a bandage. "Has been 5 years, since father died." Clara's hand stilled on the coffee cup. "She lost her mind when Jacob drowned. Blamed herself, blamed me, blamed God himself. After father passed, she..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "She tried to follow him, with father's straight razor." The coffee burned Clara's tongue. She drank it anyway, needing something to do while Thomas's pain filled up that kitchen. "The sanitarium costs $40 monthly. That's why I need them contracts. Why I can't lose this mill." "Thomas, don't." He stood abrupt-like. "I shouldn't have told you." But he had told her. After weeks of keeping distance, of separate rooms and careful silence, he'd cracked open a door. Clara wanted to reach through it, but her hand wouldn't move from that coffee cup. She went back to the ledger, found more errors. Thomas made notes as she pointed them out. They worked that way for an hour, maybe more. The light faded. He lit the kerosene lamp, adjusted the wick. In the yellow glow, she could see the exhaustion sitting heavy on him. "When did you last sleep proper?" she asked. "I'm fine." "You're not."
"You look like you've been rode hard and put up wet." He almost smiled at that. Almost. "Country talk from a Boston lady? I learned quick." She closed the ledger. "Go to bed, Thomas. The books will keep." He started to argue, then stopped. Nodded. But as he stood to go, his hand reached for the sugar bowl at the same time as hers. Their fingers brushed, just barely. Both of them froze like they'd been struck by lightning. Clara felt that touch all the way up her arm. Thomas's eyes met hers,
and she saw something there. A reaching toward, a pulling back, all in the same heartbeat. The moment stretched out thin as wire. Then a knock at the door shattered it like glass. Thomas jerked his hand back, went to answer. Pete from the telegraph office stood there, out of breath from running. "Urgent telegram, Mr. Brennan, from Sacramento." Thomas took the yellow paper, read it.
His face went hard as granite. He handed it to Clara. Stokes filing complaint, Diger. Stop marriage validity questioned. Stop. Territorial board meets Thursday. Stop. Presence required. Stop.
Morton. Thursday. Thomas grabbed the almanac off the shelf, flipped through pages. That's 3 days. If I take tomorrow's early train. Early train's canceled this week, Pete said. Track repairs, remember? Afternoon train's all you got. Thomas cursed, not soft this time. The afternoon train, then. Gets me there Thursday morning, just barely in time. Want me to wire back confirmation? Yes. Tell them I'll be there. Pete left. Thomas stood staring at that closed door, hands fisted at his sides. Stokes found out about the marriage terms. His voice was flat as hammered iron. Must have. Now he's challenging it as fraudulent. How could he know? Someone talked.
Mrs. Henley, maybe, or...
Doesn't matter who. He turns to face her. If the board invalidates our marriage, I lose everything. The contracts, the mill, my mother's care. Clara stood, though her legs trembled. What do you need me to do? Nothing. You're sick. I'll handle it. Thomas, pack. He was already moving, pulling his valise from behind the door. I need to pack. Clean shirts, the good suit. She watched him stuff clothes in that bag, movements sharp and desperate. You'll need documentation. Marriage certificate, business records. I know what I need. Let me help. You've done enough. He stopped, seemed to hear his own words. I didn't mean. Clara, you've been more help than I had any right to expect. But this is my problem. It's our problem. The words surprised her. We're married, legal and proper. That makes your problems mine. He looked at her then, really looked. She was suddenly aware of how she must appear, hollow cheeks, limp hair, that old dress hanging loose on her frame. You can barely stand. I'm standing now. You know what I mean. She did, but she also knew the feel of his hand holding hers through the fever, his voice praying when he thought she couldn't hear. Take the ledgers. The ones showing Morrison's theft, the bank's errors. Show them you're fixing the problems. He nodded, slow, moved to gather them books. Their hands reached for the same ledger. Fingers brushed again. Both froze again. The lamp flickered, making shadows dance on the walls. Outside, a dog barked. The moment stretched between them, their fingers not quite touching but not pulling away neither. Thomas jerked his hand back first. Train leaves at 2 tomorrow. Clara watched him pack them ledgers, careful not to bend the pages she'd marked. When he turned to ask her something about the Morrison calculations, she saw it clear in his face. The same reaching toward and pulling back she felt in her own chest. Thomas, what happens if the board doesn't believe you? He stopped packing, stood there with his back to her. Then we find out if this marriage is just business after all. Well now, Clara woke to pounding on the door that rattled the whole frame. Gray dawn light was just starting to creep through the curtains. Thomas had left yesterday afternoon for Sacramento. The house felt hollow as an empty church without him there. The pounding came again, harder. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, still weak from that fever. Her bare feet found the cold floor, and she padded to the door. Coming. Her voice came out cracked from sleep. She opened the door to find Stokes himself standing there, his thick frame blocking out the morning light. Behind him stood a thin man in a city suit, carrying a leather case that looked expensive. Mrs. Brennan. Stokes smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth. Or should I say, Miss Whitfield. Mrs. Brennan. She gripped that door frame to keep steady. My husband isn't home. We know. That's why we're here. Stokes pushed right past her into the house without so much as a "by your leave." The thin man followed, his boots clicking on the wood floor. "This is Mr. Hartwell, attorney at law. We need to discuss your arrangement with Thomas Brennan." "There's nothing to discuss." "Oh, but there is." Stokes settled himself in Thomas's chair by the fireplace, the wood creaking under his weight. "You see, several concerned citizens have come forward with information about your marriage. How it happened the very same day you met. How you keep separate bedrooms. How this was clearly a business transaction, not a legitimate union." Clara's fingernails dug into her palms hard enough to hurt. "Our marriage is legal." "Legal, perhaps, but legitimate?" Hartwell opened his case, pulled out a sheaf of documents. "The Territorial Board has specific requirements for marriages that affect business contracts. The marriage must be entered in good faith as a true marital union, not as a business arrangement to circumvent banking regulations. You have no proof." Mrs. Henley was quite forthcoming. Stokes examined his fingernails like they were the most interesting thing in the world. "Especially about the separate bedrooms, the lack of any marital affection. She mentioned you call him Mr. Brennan even in private." Heat crawled up Clara's neck. Mrs. Henley, who'd seemed so kind during the fever, who'd helped her through the worst of it. "Furthermore," Hartwell continued, pulling out more papers, "we have testimony from Mrs. Morton at the bank stating she saw you in Mr. Brennan's office the very afternoon of your marriage, looking through his books before you'd even met him proper." "Well, that's not... The town council is convening an emergency session this afternoon." Stokes stood, his shadow falling across her. 2 o'clock sharp. You'll need to appear and answer questions about the validity of your marriage. If you can't convince them, the marriage will be declared fraudulent. Thomas will lose his contracts. And you..." His smile got wider. "Well, fraud is a serious crime, Miss Whitfield." They left her standing in her own doorway, cold air rushing in. Clara's legs gave out. She sank down on the bottom stair, head in her hands. 2 o'clock. 5 hours to prepare a defense for something that was, at its core, exactly what they accused. A business arrangement. At least it had started that way. But no. Her fingers found the edge of her sleeve, worried at it the way she did when she was thinking hard. It had started as business, sure enough, but Thomas's hand holding hers through the fever, his voice breaking when he talked about Jacob, the way he ate her burnt biscuits without a word of complaint, the way he'd stood up for her at Henderson's store. She pushed herself to her feet, washed her face with cold water from the pitcher, put on her best dress, the one she'd patched with flour sack fabric, but it was clean and pressed. Her hands shook as she pinned up her hair. The walk to town hall took forever. Each step jarred through her still weak body. Folks stared from windows, whispered behind hands. News traveled fast as wildfire in Copper Ridge. The council room was already full when she got there. 12 men sat behind a long table. Mayor Davidson, Banker Morton, even Reverend Mills. The gallery benches were packed with townspeople. She saw Mrs. Donnelly whispering excited-like to her companion, eyes bright with the promise of scandal. "Mrs. Brennan." Mayor Davidson drew out that pause before her name deliberate-like. "Please take the chair." A single chair faced the council table. Clara sat, back straight even though her legs were trembling. Stokes and his lawyer sat to the side, papers spread out before them like weapons. "We're here to determine the validity of your marriage to Thomas Brennan," Davidson began. "Mr. Stokes has raised serious concerns about whether this marriage was entered into legitimately, or if it was merely a business arrangement designed to circumvent banking regulations." "All marriages are arrangements of some kind," Clara said. "Don't play word games, young woman." Morton leaned forward, his face red. "Did you or did you not marry Thomas Brennan on the same day you met him?" "Yes," gasps from the gallery. Mrs. Donnelly's fan started fluttering faster than a hummingbird's wings. "And do you maintain separate bedrooms?" Clara's cheeks burned hot. Many married couples answer the question, yes. And is it true that Thomas Brennan pays you a monthly wage, like an employee? Her hands gripped each other in her lap, knuckles white. He provides household money as any husband, $12 monthly according to Mrs. Henley. A specific amount, like wages. Clara lifted her chin. Yes. Davidson shook his head. This is clearly not a real marriage. It's a sham, designed to— May I speak? Clara stood, though her legs protested. You've asked your questions. Let me tell you about my marriage. Young woman, you've already admitted you want to know if it's real? Her voice got stronger, carrying to every corner of that room. Thomas Brennan took in a stranger who was 3 days without food. He could have taken advantage. Many men would have. Instead, he offered protection and dignity. Through a business arrangement, through marriage, legal and binding. She looked at each council member in turn. Yes, we married quick. Yes, we keep separate rooms. But I've watched that man work 18-hour days to keep 40 men employed. I've seen him eat burned food without a word of complaint. When I was sick with fever, he sat by my bed for 3 days straight. Prayed. A man who never prays, on his knees beside my bed? Her voice caught. She swallowed hard, continued. He sends money to Albany every month. $40 he can barely spare. For his mother's care in a sanitarium. She lost her mind when his brother drowned. The brother Thomas was supposed to be watching. He carries that guilt every blessed day, but he still sends the money, still takes care of her. Silence in the room. Even Mrs. Donnelly's fan had stopped. He taught me to grade lumber, to tell oak from pine by smell, to feel for rot with my fingers. Not because he had to, because he wanted me to understand his work, his life. Hartwell stood up. Touching story, but none of this proves— What proves a marriage? Clara turned on him, fire in her voice now. The bedroom activities you're all too polite to ask about direct? The public displays of affection? Or the quiet partnership of two people choosing to build something together? The law requires a marriage entered in good faith. I entered it in good faith. So did Thomas. She faced the council again. We didn't marry for love, that's true enough. But we married for survival, both of us. And in the weeks since, we've become— She searched for words. We've become necessary to each other. That's not. I found $460 Morrison has been stealing from the mill. Systematic theft Thomas never saw because he was too overwhelmed to check proper. I found $93 in bank errors, overcharging on interest, Mr. Morton. Would a false wife work that hard for her supposed husband's business? Morton's face went red as a beet. Calculation errors happen. Every month for 2 years? She pulled a paper from her pocket. She'd brought 1 page of evidence just in case. Here's your own bank's interest calculations. Wrong. Consistent-like. Davidson took the paper, studied it. His eyebrows went up. Furthermore, Clara continued, her voice steady now, I know about every scar on Thomas's hands from mill work. I know he can't sleep past dawn because that's when Jacob drowned. Dawn, when the ice looked solid. I know he takes his coffee black, but adds sugar when his back hurts because his grandmother told him sweet things ease pain. How could you know such intimate? Because I pay attention. Because that's what wives do. Real wives. She sat back down, suddenly exhausted. We may not share a bed, but we share burdens. We may not speak of love, but we practice loyalty. If that's not marriage, then what is? The council members looked at each other. Davidson cleared his throat. We'll need to deliberate. The door banged open. Pete from the telegraph office ran in, face red from running hard. Telegram from Sacramento. Mr. Brennan's on the express train. Says to tell the council he'll be here by nightfall, and he has something important to say about his marriage. Clara's stomach dropped like a stone in a well. Thomas was coming back. But what could he have to say that she hadn't already said? Unless— "We'll recess until Thomas Brennan arrives," Davidson announced. "Mrs. Brennan, you're to remain available." The crowd filed out, whispering like autumn leaves. Clara stayed in her chair, unable to move. What would Thomas say when he got here? Would he confirm everything she'd just said about them becoming necessary to each other? Or would he tell them the truth, that he'd never intended this to be anything more than a business arrangement? That whatever she felt growing between them was just her imagination, her loneliness, her need to belong somewhere after losing everything. Stokes paused beside her chair. "Your husband's a practical man, Miss Whitfield. When he gets here, he'll do the practical thing. Take the easy way out. Admit the truth and cut his losses." "You don't know him." "Don't I?" Stokes's smile was cold as winter. "I know he's been paying someone in Albany for years. His mother, you say? Or perhaps another wife. Has it occurred to you to check?" The door closed behind him, leaving Clara alone in that empty council room. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, making long shadows. Another wife. The thought was poison spreading through her chest. She didn't believe it, couldn't believe it. But Thomas had been so careful to keep them Albany payments secret, and he'd pulled back every time they'd gotten close, like he was remembering something. Or someone. What if everything she'd just defended was built on a lie bigger than the one they'd started with? Well, now, Clara stood when she heard that train whistle cutting through the evening air. Through the council room window, she could see lanterns gathering at the station platform like fireflies. The express from Sacramento, 2 hours past sunset. Her legs ached from sitting in that hard chair all afternoon. She'd refused to leave the room, afraid they'd convene without her. Mrs. Davidson had brought her tea and cornbread around 6 o'clock. The tea sat cold, the cornbread untouched. Footsteps on the wooden walkway outside, a lot of them. Half the town must be following Thomas from the station. The door opened, and there he stood, covered in travel dust from head to toe, a leather document case under his arm. His eyes found hers right away, across that room. Clara. Just her name, but the way he said it made her throat tight. Behind him, the council members filed in, taking their places. Stokes and his lawyer went back to their seats, whispering, urgent-like. Davidson gavelled the session back to order. "Mr. Brennan, you've returned rather dramatically. The council has been questioning the validity of your marriage." "I know." Thomas set the case on the table. "Pete telegraphed me the situation." "And you have something to say about it?" Thomas turned to look at Clara. Dust had settled in the lines around his eyes, making him look older. Or maybe that was just exhaustion. "May I speak with my wife privately first?" "This is highly irregular." 5 minutes. Davidson consulted with the other council members, then nodded. 5 minutes. Use the clerk's office." Thomas crossed to Clara, offered his arm. She took it, felt the tremor running through his muscles. Exhaustion or something else, she couldn't tell. The clerk's office was small, just a desk and 2 chairs. Thomas closed the door, leaned against it, heavy-like. "Stokes got to you while I was gone." "This morning, with a lawyer." She couldn't look at him direct. "Thomas, I told them, I defended us, the marriage. Said things about what we've become." "Clara." She made herself meet his eyes. "I heard. Mrs. Davidson was at the station. Told me what you said." He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. "This came to the hotel in Sacramento, from Albany." Her hands shook as she opened it. The writing was careful, looping, like someone was concentrating hard on every letter. "Dear Thomas, the money arrived as always. I know you struggle to send it. A mother knows. I am better this month, clear enough to write." Clear enough to say, "Forgive yourself. Jacob would want you to live, not just survive. The woman you mentioned in your last letter, Clara, she sounds like someone who could teach you the difference. Your loving mother, Margaret Brennan." Clara looked up from the letter. Thomas was watching her, his face unreadable. You wrote to her about me? After the fever, when I thought. He stopped, swallowed. I wanted someone to know you existed, in case. In case I died? In case you lived. He took the letter back, folded it careful-like. Clara, I went to Sacramento to fight for the contracts. I got them. Outbid Stokes on everything. Relief flooded through her chest. That's wonderful. But I also went to think about us, this arrangement. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a stack of bills. $300. Enough to get you to San Francisco. Set yourself up proper. Find work that doesn't require this. The money sat between them on that little desk. More money than she'd seen since her father's business went bust. Freedom. Safety. A new start without all these complications. You want me to leave? I want you to choose. His voice was rough as sandpaper. Not because you're hungry. Not because you got nowhere else to go. But because, if you choose to stay, I need to know it's real. That you're choosing to stay, not just surviving. Clara stared at that money. $300. She could rent a decent room in San Francisco, buy proper clothes, find work as a bookkeeper somewhere respectable, start over clean with no one knowing about Boston or William or any of it. And if I stay? Then we stop pretending it's just business. He moved closer, close enough she could smell the train smoke on his coat, the dust from traveling. I can't do halfway anymore, Clara. Not after sitting beside your bed thinking you might die. Not after getting that telegram today and realizing I was terrified, not of losing the bookkeeper or the housekeeper, of losing you. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard it hurt. Thomas, choose now, before we go back out there. Take the money, and I'll tell them the marriage was fraudulent. You'll be free by morning. Or stay, and we tell them the truth. Which truth? That we married for the wrong reasons, but... He stopped, ran his hand through his dusty hair. That somewhere between that first day and now, I started waking up listening for your footsteps in the kitchen. Started checking on your breathing when you sleep. Yes, I check. Through the door, just listening. Because the thought of that breathing stopping terrifies me worse than losing the mill. Clara's legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She sank into the clerk's chair, stared at that pile of money. In Boston, after William died, his mother said I was cursed, that everyone I loved would leave. The words came out cracked. My mother died when I was 12. Father lost himself to drink after the bankruptcy. William coughed blood for 3 months while I watched. I'm terrified that if I choose you, really choose you, I could die tomorrow. Thomas knelt down beside the chair, not touching her, but close. So close. Mill accident. Horse throws me. Fever, like you just had. But Clara, I could also live 40 more years. We both could. The separate rooms can stay separate if you want, or not. Your choice. His hand moved toward hers on the desk, stopped just short of touching. I'm not William. I'm not your father. I'm just a man who owns a sawmill and sends money to his broken mother and eats burned biscuits without complaint because the woman who burns them is worth more than perfect biscuits. Clara laughed, or maybe it was a sob. She wasn't sure which. That's what I told the council, that you eat my burned food. Did you tell them I actually prefer it that way? Reminds me someone real cooked it, not some perfect wife who doesn't exist. The door rattled. Davidson's voice came through. Time's up. Clara looked at that money. $300. Freedom. Safety. A clean start. She pushed it back across the desk to Thomas. I choose you. The words came out steady as she could make them. Not the house, or the safety, or the $12 monthly. You. The man who teaches me about lumber grain and holds my hand through fever and prays when he thinks nobody's watching. Thomas's hand covered hers then. Warm, rough with calluses, real. You sure about this? I've been sure since you sat in that chair for 3 days. She turned her hand palm up, laced her fingers through his. Maybe before that. Maybe since you pushed that cornbread across the desk when I was starving. He pulled her to her feet, kept their hands joined. The council's waiting. What do we tell them? The truth? That we chose each other. Maybe not the way folks expect, but choosing all the same. They walked back into that council room hand in hand. The whole gallery had filled up again, more townspeople drawn by the drama. Mrs. Donnelly's eyes went wide as saucers at their joined hands. Mr. Brennan, Davidson began, you have something to tell us about your marriage? Yes. Thomas's hand tightened on Clara's. It's real. You're saying it was not a business arrangement? I'm saying it started as one. Clara already told you that. Thomas faced the room, his voice carrying strong. We married for practical reasons. But in the weeks since, we've built something. Call it partnership, call it marriage, call it whatever makes you comfortable. But it's real, and it's ours. That's not sufficient. I have here contracts worth $8,000. Thomas set his document case on the table, pulled out the papers. Signed in Sacramento, all requiring a married proprietor. If you invalidate our marriage, I lose them. 40 men lose their jobs. The mill closes. The council members looked at each other, uncertain. But more important than that, Thomas continued, you'd be destroying something built on mutual respect and growing affection. Not all marriages start with love, gentlemen. Some of yours didn't. He looked pointed-like at Morton, whose arranged marriage to the banker's daughter was common knowledge. But Clara and I choose to continue, choose to build, choose each other. Clara stepped forward. We're staying married. Whatever you decide about the contracts, we're staying married. Even if it costs the mill. Stokes stood up, his face red. You'd stay in a marriage that gains you nothing? It gains me everything that matters. Clara looked at Thomas. A partner? A friend? Someone who sees me as more than a bookkeeper or a fallen woman from Boston. Someone who trusts me with his mother's story and his brother's memory. Thomas pulled her closer. Someone who makes terrible biscuits, but excellent calculations. Who fights fever with pure stubbornness and faces down councils with courage I didn't know existed. Davidson cleared his throat. All very touching, but... Call the vote. Thomas's voice was iron. We've said our piece. Davidson looked at the other council members. One by one, they nodded. All in favor of validating the Brennan marriage? 8 hands rose, then 9, 10. Even Morton, grudging-like, raised his hand. Only Reverend Mills kept his down, his face pinched with disapproval. Motion carries. The marriage stands. Davidson gavelled once. And Mr. Brennan, congratulations on those contracts. The crowd started dispersing, buzzing with gossip like bees in a hive. Stokes stalked out without a word, his lawyer trailing behind. Clara and Thomas stayed standing there, hands still joined as the room emptied. Now what? Clara asked when they were alone. Now we go home. Thomas touched her face, gentle as handling new lumber. Tomorrow I start on that addition to the house. Addition? Another room. For the future. Whatever that brings. Heat climbed her neck. Thomas Brennan, are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we need more space. For whatever comes. He pulled her toward the door. Also, I'm half-starved. Think you could burn some biscuits for supper? I could try for only slightly scorched. Don't you dare. I've grown partial to the charcoal taste. They walked out into the night together. The moon was rising full and bright over the mountains. Their shadows merged into one on the ground as they walked, not toward a sunset this time, but toward home. At the house, Clara went to her room to change out of her good dress. She could hear Thomas moving in his own room, the familiar sounds of his evening routine. But when she came to the kitchen, she found him there with 2 cups of coffee, his ledger open on the table. Thought we could go over the Morrison evidence together. He pushed a cup toward her. Plan how to get our money back. She sat beside him, not across, but beside. Their shoulders touched as they leaned over the ledger together. "Start with the June orders," she said. "The pattern's clearest there." He nodded, made notes as she explained. Their hands bumped, reaching for the pencil. This time, neither one pulled away. They worked until near midnight, planning how to recover the stolen funds, how to expand the mill, the future they were building together. When Clara finally stood to go to bed, Thomas caught her hand. "Thank you for defending us, for choosing to stay. Thank you for giving me the choice." He squeezed her fingers, let go gentle-like. She walked to her door, turned back. "Thomas, your mother was right. You deserve to live, not just survive." "So do you," she smiled. "Then I reckon we'll have to teach each other how. I reckon we will." The lamplight flickered between them, casting shadows on the wall. Outside, a nightbird called. Everything was different now. Everything was the same, but underneath it all, something new was growing, strong as heartwood, true as grain. Well now, 6 months later, I watched Clara teaching Mrs. Morrison's daughter bookkeeping at our kitchen table. That girl arrived hungry for knowledge, same way Clara once arrived hungry for bread. We'd expanded the house by then, not just with rooms, but with purpose. Sunday afternoons, our parlor filled with mill workers' wives learning to read ledgers, understanding their husbands' wages. Clara insisted knowledge shouldn't be kept locked up like treasure. The morning light caught her face as she explained compound interest. Her hand found mine across that table, natural as breathing. We share a bed these days, though that ain't the important part. The important part is this. 2 broken people chose to build something whole. Not through grand gestures or pretty words, but through small acts of trust. Teaching, learning, staying. The ladies bring covered dishes now. Pot roasts, apple pies, fresh bread. They don't whisper behind their hands anymore. We became part of Copper Ridge, and Copper Ridge became part of us. That's how it works, I reckon. You start by saving yourself, then each other. Then somehow, you end up saving a whole community. One ledger, one lesson, one shared meal at a time. This work is inspired by Western frontier stories created solely for entertainment purposes. This story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental. The narrative explores themes of resilience, partnership, and community building through peaceful means, reflecting values of mutual respect and human dignity in challenging circumstances.